In 1997, a boy vanished from his family's farmhouse without a trace. No broken windows, no footprints, just one strange thing left behind. The furnace in the basement began to breathe. Now, nearly 30 years later, his sister has come home, and behind that same furnace wall, something is waiting, something that remembers, and it just knocked back. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, because some stories weren't meant to stay buried. Emily Kessler hadn't heard her mother's voice in almost 6 years. And yet, the letter in her hand made it impossible not to think of her. The envelope was yellowed and unsealed, as if it had been opened once and closed again by guilt. There was no return address. Just a name, Emily Kessler, scrawled in handwriting that made her stomach turn. It arrived on a Thursday, tucked between a bank statement and a real estate flyer. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded once, no date, no greeting. He's still there, behind the furnace. Emily sat down at the kitchen table, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The apartment around her was still. Refrigerator humming, a faint city siren in the distance, the pale glow of morning pressing through the blinds. Her coffee had gone cold. The spoon trembled slightly in its saucer. She read the words again. Her first instinct was to tear it up. Her second was to call her sister. Her third, and the one that won, was to stand up and cross to the hallway closet. She reached into a dusty box labeled 1997 photos. Clippings, police flyers with her brother's face on them. Jacob Kessler, age 8. Last seen June 2nd, 1997. The farmhouse had been searched, every inch of it. So they were told. The police said there was no sign of a struggle, no signs of a break-in. Jacob had simply vanished. The only part of the house they couldn't access was the basement utility room, the old boiler and furnace area, sealed shut with a rusted latch. The door had been warped shut by a winter flood, they said. Nothing significant was behind it. But Emily remembered something different. She remembered the sound that used to come from behind that door. Not the clank of old pipes, but something softer, like whispering, like scratching. She never spoke of it. Not to her mother, not to the detectives, and not to her therapist. Until now, she had let herself believe it was all a child's imagination. But now, he's still there, behind the furnace. She pulled her phone from her pocket. The contact was still there, though she hadn't used it in years. Mom. The line rang. Once, twice, then a click. A voice answered, thinner than she remembered. Emily? Emily froze. The sound of her mother's voice unlocked something she didn't expect. Not anger, not sorrow, but fear. You got one too, didn't you? Emily asked quietly. Her mother was silent for a beat. Then, yes. This morning. Did you call anyone? No. Why not? Her mother's voice faltered. Because I think it's time. Emily stared down at the letter. Her fingers curled around it. I'm coming home, she said. The drive north felt like moving backward through time. Emily passed familiar exits on the highway. The lake with the leaning dock. The billboard for the old dairy farm that had closed when she was a teenager. Each mile peeled away a layer of her present life until she was no longer 39 with a project deadline and a rent-controlled apartment in the city. She was 11 again, in the back seat of her father's Buick. Jacob beside her, humming to himself, inventing a song with no words. They used to play a game in the car, spotting certain trees they named, counting broken fence posts like stars. That stopped the summer he went missing. After that, there was no music, no counting, just silence. The farmhouse appeared over the rise like something out of a memory she had tried too hard to forget. The gravel driveway was choked with frost. The mailbox hung by one rusted screw. The front windows, once filled with light and sun-bleached curtains, were now empty, black rectangles against the weathered gray wood. Emily pulled up slowly, tires crunching over brittle ice. She turned off the engine and sat in the quiet. No birds, no wind. She had forgotten how still the place could be. The front door opened before she could knock. Her mother stood framed in the doorway, smaller than Emily remembered, wrapped in a pale cardigan. Her once dark hair was streaked with silver. There were deeper lines around her mouth and a shadow behind her eyes that hadn't been there before. Neither of them moved. Finally, her mother stepped back. "Come in. I kept the heat running, just in case." Emily crossed the threshold and into the past. The house hadn't changed much. The same braided rug in the entry. The same grandfather clock that hadn't worked since 2003. A faint scent of cedar, old coffee, and something faintly metallic lingered in the air. Not unpleasant, just strange. On the hallway wall, Jacob's school photo still hung in its plastic frame. The same toothless smile. The same too big flannel shirt. Emily paused in front of it. "He would have turned 34 this year," her mother said quietly. Emily nodded, unable to speak. In the kitchen, her mother poured tea as if no time had passed. They sat in silence for a while, both cupping their mugs like something sacred. Emily finally reached into her coat and slid the letter onto the table. Her mother didn't look surprised. "I burned mine," she said softly, "but I memorized it first." "Do you think it's real?" Her mother didn't answer. She stared at the tea, as if reading answers in the steam. "You know what the police said," she finally murmured, "that the furnace room was inaccessible, that he likely wandered off." Emily's hand clenched. "But he didn't just wander off." "No," her mother agreed, her voice barely a whisper. "He was afraid of the basement. You remember?" Emily did. He used to cry if the door was open too wide, said something lived behind the furnace, a whispering shadow. Everyone thought he was just being imaginative. But Emily had heard it too, once, and now someone, or something, wanted them to look again. Later that night, after her mother had gone to bed, Emily stood at the top of the basement stairs. The door creaked as she opened it. Cold air spilled up from the darkness. She clicked on the light switch. A dim bulb flickered to life, casting shadows along the concrete steps. Each creak beneath her foot sounded too loud. The basement looked untouched. Boxes, paint cans, a row of dusty Christmas decorations, and in the back corner, the furnace room door. Still closed, still chained, still warped shut like it had been swallowed by the house itself. Emily approached it slowly. There, on the wooden surface, just above the handle, was something new. A single smudge, like a child's fingerprint. Fresh. The next morning brought snow. Not much. Just a dusting that frosted the tops of the fence posts and coated the porch railing. Emily stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching it fall in slow spirals. Her mother was still upstairs, likely asleep, or avoiding her. At 9:13 a.m., someone knocked on the front door. Emily blinked. The sound startled her. The house was so far off the road, visitors were rare, especially in winter. She opened the door cautiously. An older man stood there in a tan parka, wool gloves, and a faded twins cap. His breath curled in the cold air. His eyes were kind but sharp. "Emily Kessler?" he asked. "Yes?" He smiled faintly. "Didn't think you'd remember me. I'm Walt Henderson. I live up on Ridge Lane. Your dad and I played high school baseball together. I helped board up the place after everything." She stared for a moment. The name clicked. Walter, the neighbor who used to give them extra tomatoes in the summer. The man who used to plow their drive before the county snow crews came. "I remember you," she said. "You used to call Jacob spaghetti legs." Walt chuckled. He hated that. Emily managed a smile. "I saw your car in the driveway last night," he said. "Figured you came back for a reason." She hesitated. Someone sent a letter. Walt's expression changed, just slightly, like a curtain shifting in a closed room. What kind of letter? Emily opened the door wider and gestured toward the kitchen. You want coffee? They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Jacob had once built towers out of sugar cubes. Emily slid the letter across. Walt didn't touch it. He read it, then leaned back, folding his arms. I'll be honest with you, he said. You and your brother were good kids, but I always thought there was something wrong with that basement. Emily stiffened. What do you mean? You ever hear a house breathe, Emily? She frowned. Breathe? I know it sounds strange, he said, but I used to help your dad with a furnace. Every fall, right before the freeze. There was something about that room. It was too warm, always, even with the heat off. And when you stood by the back wall, it felt hollow. Emily's fingers gripped her coffee mug. Hollow? Walt nodded. Like there was space behind it. I told your dad once. He just smiled, said the house had secrets. Her voice came out low. And then Jacob went missing. Walt looked at her steadily. I never believed he ran off. Kids don't run without shoes, not in this part of Minnesota. Emily swallowed hard. The furnace room is still sealed. You should have someone look at that wall. She nodded slowly. Walt reached into his coat and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping, yellowed, brittle. He laid it on the table. It was a short article, dated June 5th, 1997. Title, Local Boy Still Missing. But someone had circled something in red ink. A name. Michael Halbrook, age 56. Maintenance contractor, previously employed by the Kessler family, reported missing 2 days after Jacob. Emily's heart dropped. I don't remember this, she whispered. Most people don't, Walt said. But 2 people went missing that week, not 1. Later, as Walt left, Emily stood at the door watching his figure disappear down the snowy path. She returned to the kitchen and picked up the article again, reading the name over and over. Michael Halbrook. The name meant nothing to her, but maybe it meant something to the house. She glanced toward the basement. She didn't know what she'd find behind the furnace, but she no longer believed she'd find only memories. The snow kept falling through the afternoon, softening the roof lines, blanketing the past in white. Emily sat at the dining room table with the old family photo box open before her, photographs and clippings scattered like pieces of a forgotten map. The name Michael Halbrook echoed in her mind. She had spent an hour going through the newspaper archive online, trying to find more. Nothing. 1 article, 1 mention. And then, silence. As if someone had erased him. She picked up a photograph of her father, taken a year before he passed. He stood by the barn with a young man, maybe early 50s, clean-shaven, tall. He wore a tool belt and was holding a thermos. It was the kind of photo you wouldn't look twice at. But on the back, in faded blue ink, her mother had written, Fall Maintenance Day. Me, Jack, and MHMH Emily stared at the initials. She climbed the stairs 2 at a time. Her mother was awake, seated on the edge of her bed with a quilt wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes flicked to the photo in Emily's hand, then back to her face. Why didn't you tell me about him? Emily asked. Her mother said nothing. Michael Halbrook. He worked here. He went missing the same week Jacob did. That's not a coincidence. Her mother looked older in the light, thinner, almost translucent, like someone who'd been worn down from the inside. We never knew for sure he was missing, she said finally. He was a quiet man, came twice a year to service the furnace and water heater, never stayed long. Then 1 year, he didn't come back. Emily sat beside her. You wrote his initials on this photo. I shouldn't have. Why? Her mother looked out the window. Because I didn't want to remember what he said the last time I saw him. Emily waited. It was 3 days before Jacob disappeared, she said. He came early, said something was off in the furnace room. Not mechanical, atmospheric. Said it felt like the house was breathing. Emily's chest tightened. Walt said the same thing. Her mother nodded slowly. Your father laughed it off. Thought Michael was eccentric, but Michael wasn't the type to scare easy. That night he came back, unannounced. Said he wanted to take another look. Jack told him no. Said we'd wait until fall. And then Jacob. Her mother closed her eyes. And then everything changed. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She wandered the halls, touching picture frames, opening drawers, searching for anything else that might connect the threads. In her father's old desk, she found a thick manila folder labeled Property, Kessler Farm. Most of it was utility bills, but one paper slipped free from the back, a hand-drawn diagram. The basement, dated 1973. She looked closer. On the diagram, a narrow rectangle had been labeled Storage Tunnel, sealed in red ink. It extended behind the furnace room wall. Emily's stomach turned. He's still there, behind the furnace. In the morning, she returned to the cellar. This time, she brought gloves, a flashlight, and a hammer. She wasn't going to wait any longer. The door was warped and chained, but the hinges gave slowly under pressure. She struck carefully, quietly, like someone afraid to wake something. After 30 minutes of effort, the door cracked open with a reluctant groan. A wave of stale, warm air brushed her face. The furnace loomed ahead, cold now, dormant. Pipes curled like iron veins across the ceiling. She stepped inside. The flashlight flickered, then steadied. The walls were lined with stone and brick, and in the far corner, behind the unit, was what looked like a patched-over segment of wall, square and uneven. She moved closer. Her breath caught in her throat. There, barely visible in the dusty stone, were markings, scratched lines, faint impressions, as if someone had once tried to claw their way out. Emily's hand trembled as she lifted the light higher. There were initials in the dust. J.K. Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat in the living room, lights off, listening to the furnace hum through the floorboards like it always had. A low, rhythmic breath that never seemed to stop, even when the unit itself wasn't running. She held the photograph of the furnace room diagram in one hand and a cup of tea in the other, though it had long gone cold. Storage tunnel, sealed. Why would there be a tunnel in a farmhouse basement? And why seal it? The markings behind the furnace hadn't been imagined. They were real. Deep grooves scratched into old mortar and stone. The kind of marks a person might make if they were trying to get out. The next morning, Emily made a call. The public library in town was still running, though smaller now. She asked for the archives and was connected to a local historian, a soft-spoken woman named Helen Orville, who agreed to meet her that afternoon. I've worked with the old property ledgers, Helen said over the phone. The Kessler place, it goes back to the late 1800s. Most folks think it was always a farmhouse, but that land had a story long before your family arrived. The library smelled of paper and floor wax, just as Emily remembered. Helen was waiting in the back corner, a stack of yellowed folders beside her. Miss Kessler, she said kindly, I pulled what I could find from before 1950. The rest, well, it gets murky. She opened one of the folders. The land was originally part of a larger property owned by a man named Elias Granger. He ran a sort of home for troubled youth. Unofficial, backwoods, not state-regulated. It shut down after a fire in 1926. Records say a section of the building collapsed. No mention of casualties, but that was common back then. Emily leaned closer. What kind of collapse? Underground. There was a root cellar, and something beyond it. A bricked-over passage. The documents don't say what it led to, only that it was unsafe. When the land was sold in the 40s, the house had been torn down. A new structure, your family's, was built over the foundation. Emily stared at her. They built the farmhouse over the ruins. Helen nodded. People did that sort of thing all the time, especially if they wanted to forget. Back at the house, Emily laid the old blueprint next to her father's diagram. The lines matched. The storage tunnel was in the same location as the old root cellar from the Granger records. And it was sealed. Not with wood, but with concrete and brick. She went back down to the furnace room and crouched in the corner again. This time she pressed her palm flat to the wall. It was warmer than the rest of the basement, and behind it, something gave slightly, like an echo behind stone. She stood abruptly, the flashlight shaking in her hand. From the stairs above, she thought she heard movement. A soft step, then silence. "Someone's here," she whispered. But when she went up, the hallway was empty. Her mother was still asleep. The front door was locked. Still, on the porch, she found something resting on the wood rail. A button. Worn, brass. Like one from a coat too old to wear, too precious to throw away. She picked it up slowly. And as she turned it in her hand, she saw, scratched faintly into the metal on the underside, the initials M.H. Emily hadn't been up to the attic in over 20 years. The narrow pull-down ladder groaned under her weight as she climbed, flashlight tucked under one arm. Dust swirled in the cold air above her, stirred by her arrival like forgotten memories waking from sleep. The attic had always frightened her as a child, not because it was dark or cramped, but because it felt watched. She'd once told Jacob it was where the house kept its secrets. Now she knew she'd been more right than she realized. She moved past old boxes of holiday decorations and childhood toys, her breath visible in the chill. Something drew her to the far corner, where an antique trunk sat wedged beneath a sloped beam. It wasn't labeled, and the lock had long since rusted through. Inside, under layers of yellowed linens and cracked books, she found a leather-bound journal. It was worn at the corners, the spine nearly split. No name on the front. She opened it. March 12th, 1996. Kessler property. Initial inspection. Emily froze. The handwriting was careful, methodical. Mail. Basement utility room wall shows signs of expansion. Not from moisture, from something else. Internal pressure. Heat readings inconsistent with room temperature. Back wall sounds hollow to the tap, but only some days when it's quiet. She flipped further ahead. May 5th, 1997. The breathing wall again. This time, I heard something. Not a voice, not an animal. A rhythm, like someone waiting. Then, toward the back. May 30th, 1997. The boy asked me if the wall was alive. Her breath caught. He said it whispered to him at night. Said it remembered things. I told him it was just the furnace. I shouldn't have lied. The final entry. June 1st, 1997. I'm going back tonight after hours. They need to know. If I don't return, let the wall sleep. Let it forget. There was no signature. But she didn't need one. It was his. Michael Hallbrook. Emily sat in the attic for a long time, the journal in her lap. She could hear the soft ticking of the house beneath her, like something old and patient. She descended the ladder and found her mother in the kitchen, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. Where was he staying? Emily asked without preamble. When he worked here. Her mother looked startled. Michael? Yes. Her mother hesitated. We had a guest room back then, in the west hallway. Emily turned without a word and headed down the narrow corridor she hadn't walked in decades. The west hallway had always felt colder than the rest of the house, though her father said it was just poor insulation. She opened the door to the guest room. The mattress was gone, the curtains moth-eaten, but the space felt heavy, as though time still lived here, untouched. There was a bookshelf against the wall, mostly empty, except for one object, a small toy, a carved wooden figurine, a boy holding a lantern. Jacob's. She remembered it. He'd lost it the week before he disappeared. Said it had been taken. Emily picked it up slowly, turned it over. There was something scratched into the base. Still here. That night, she dreamed of the furnace, of warm stone and shallow breath, of scratching, not frantic, but deliberate. And in her dream, Jacob's voice whispered, "It doesn't want to be forgotten." The next morning, the snow had stopped. The sky above the farmhouse was pale, almost colorless. The kind of cold that settled into the ground and didn't leave for weeks. Emily stood in the driveway with a set of keys in her pocket and a folded note in her hand. Walt Henderson arrived just after 10. He pulled up in his old pickup, stepped out with a crowbar and a canvas bag of tools, and gave her a firm nod. "You sure about this?" he asked, tightening his gloves. "No," she said, "but I need to know." Walt didn't press further. He followed her through the house and down the basement stairs in silence, the heavy steps creaking beneath his weight. Emily unlocked the furnace room door and stepped aside. The air inside was even warmer than before, not like a furnace room, more like a greenhouse left in direct sun. It felt wrong. Walt moved slowly, assessing the wall behind the unit. "This is newer than the rest," he said, tapping the bricks with the butt of his flashlight. "Different mortar, poured over something. And here," he pointed to the edge, "these bricks weren't laid by a professional. Someone patched this up fast." Emily nodded. "There's a tunnel behind it, an old one, from before the house was built." Walt raised an eyebrow but didn't question her. He crouched to unpack his tools, then the light shifted. Emily stepped back instinctively as the shadows on the wall seemed to ripple, not from her movement, not from the flashlight, but from within the wall itself. Walt paused. "Did you see that?" "I did." The air grew thick, not warm now, but dense, like the oxygen had been drained. Then a sound, software faint, like breath. Emily leaned in just slightly, heart pounding, and then knock, once, from inside the wall. She stumbled back, a cry caught in her throat. Walt froze, crowbar half raised. That wasn't us. They stared at the wall in stunned silence. "Still here," the words from the figurine echoed in her mind. "He's still there." Walt recovered first. "That's not the furnace, and it's not the pipes." Emily's voice shook. "Do we open it?" Walt glanced at the tools, then back at the wall. "If we do, we don't do it alone." They went upstairs, locking the basement door behind them. Her mother sat in the parlor, knitting something that wasn't growing. Her hands moved out of habit now, not purpose. Emily sat across from her. "Did you hear it?" Her mother looked up, and for a moment, the distance in her eyes vanished. "I've heard it every night since the letter came," she whispered. Emily's breath caught. "Why didn't you say anything?" Her mother folded the half-finished scarf in her lap. "Because part of me thought it was Jacob." Emily didn't speak. "He used to talk about the wall," her mother said. "He said it listened to him, said it held memories. I thought he was dreaming. But maybe it was remembering him too." A long silence. Then her mother reached out and took Emily's hand. "If you're going to open it," she said, "do it before the next full moon. That's when it's strongest." Emily's eyes widened. "What is?" Her mother looked at her. "Whatever it is that remembers." That night, Emily sat by the basement door with a journal open in her lap. The pages seemed to breathe with her. "Let the wall sleep," Halbrook had written. But the wall wasn't sleeping anymore. It was waiting. Emily didn't dream that night. Not in the usual way. She saw the furnace room again, dark, pulsing with warmth. But it wasn't empty. A boy stood there, barefoot and pale, with dust on his cheeks and soot on his fingers. He looked up at her slowly. And though his lips didn't move, she heard the words as clearly as a whisper behind her ear. "You stopped looking." Emily jolted awake, the sound of the words still hanging in the quiet. The bedside lamp was off. She reached for it, flicked the switch. Nothing. The power was out. She stumbled into the hallway. The old clock wasn't ticking. The thermostat screen was blank. Downstairs, her mother stood near the window, wrapped in a robe. Emily's voice was hoarse. "Power's down." Her mother nodded. "It started with the lights flickering, then the heater went. Now everything's quiet." Emily paused. "Did you hear anything else?" Her mother's hand tightened around her robe. Footsteps, on the stairs. They both looked at the basement door. It was still locked. Still. But the silence in the house had changed. Not peace. Something closer to waiting. Later that morning, Walt returned with a headlamp, a thermal scanner, and 2 heavy-duty lanterns. "I brought salt too," he said, only half joking. "Just in case." Emily managed a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Together they entered the basement again. The air was thick, heavier than before, like the walls were pressing in. The flashlight beam swam in the dark, picking out dust motes that floated unnaturally slow. Walt scanned the wall with the thermal gun, his brow furrowed. "It's hotter than the rest of the room, by a lot. Something's radiating behind it." "Like a furnace?" Emily asked. "Number, this isn't mechanical heat. This feels residual. Like the wall is remembering something warm." Emily shivered. They unpacked tools in silence. The first strike came slow, a crowbar wedged into the brick line. The mortar cracked. A sudden gust of warm air rushed from a hairline fracture, strong enough to blow Emily's hair back. Walt dropped the tool. "That's not normal." The flashlight flickered. They both froze. Then, footsteps, light. Upstairs. Walt whispered, "Is your mom home?" Emily shook her head. "She left to get groceries." They waited, breathless. Another step, slow, deliberate. Then nothing. Walt grabbed the crowbar again. "Keep going," he asked. Emily looked at the wall, at the fresh crack running through its center. Behind it, she could almost hear breathing again, but slower now. Like something was aware of them, like it had woken up. She swallowed hard. "Yes," she said. "We open it." That night, Emily found her bedroom window open, though she didn't remember opening it. There, on the windowsill, sat the wooden figurine of the boy with the lantern. Its head had turned. Now it faced inward, toward her. The next morning, they began breaking through the wall in earnest. Emily and Walt worked in shifts, slow, deliberate strikes that chipped away the thick, uneven mortar. Every crack released a strange, stale warmth, and with it came the smell of old dust, dry earth, and something else. Something sweet, like decaying wood soaked in syrup. Neither of them mentioned it. By midday, Walt dislodged a brick near the base, and behind it, for the first time, they saw it. Darkness. Not just a shadow, but a deep, unnatural void. Not the absence of light, but the presence of something older than silence. Emily leaned forward with her lantern. The beam revealed a short corridor, barely tall enough to crouch in, carved from rough stone. No finished walls, no bricks, just raw earth. She reached inside. Her fingers brushed something cool. She pulled it out slowly, a small metal object. Rusted, twisted, a key. Not modern, old, ornate, and hanging from it, rotted away to little more than threads, was the faint remnant of what once might have been ribbon. Walt held up the lantern and peered into the passage. "There's something else," he said, "on the floor." He reached in and gently withdrew a small wooden box, no larger than a jewelry case. The lid was cracked. Inside, wrapped in waxed cloth, were teeth. Tiny, worn, children's. Emily turned away, her breath catching, not from shock, but from something deeper. Recognition. Jacob had lost a tooth the week before he disappeared. She remembered because he cried when she told him the tooth fairy couldn't come if he hid it under his bed instead of his pillow. They cleared more bricks. The tunnel beyond curved gently, vanishing into darkness. Emily wasn't sure how far it went, but something about the air told her it didn't go far. Not in distance, but in depth. She stood, staring into it, when her hand brushed the inside of the wall and caught on something rough. She turned her lantern on it. A message, carved into the inner stone surface, nearly invisible unless lit from the side. Don't open it unless you're ready to leave something behind. Beneath that, J.H. 1997. Emily stared at the initials. Not Jacob Kessler. J.H. Jacob Halbrook. She backed away slowly. Walt, she said, voice shaking. There were 2 Jacobs. That night, Emily couldn't sit still. She read the journal again and again. The way Halbrook had described the wall, as breathing, as aware. The way Jacob had described the tunnel to her the week before he disappeared. It hums at night, he had whispered. It wants stories. It wants to remember. She thought of the teeth, of the button, of the scratched initials, written in a hand that didn't quite match Jacob's. There was a pattern, a memory loop. Whatever lived behind the wall, whatever had been sealed in long ago, it didn't take people. It kept them, like pages in a diary. And now the wall had opened just wide enough to want one more. Emily waited until nightfall. Not because she wanted to, but because something in her told her it had to be dark, that the wall behind the furnace only remembered clearly in the dark. Walt offered to stay, but she asked him to leave. She needed to do this alone. She descended the basement stairs with the lantern in one hand and the journal tucked beneath her arm. The furnace groaned softly beside her, not running, yet exhaling warm air like breath through unseen lungs. She crouched at the tunnel entrance. The carved message still lingered in her mind. Don't open it unless you're ready to leave something behind. The key from the box was tied around her wrist with a strip of linen. The other items, the teeth, the ribbon, the box, sat untouched on the work table. Emily crawled in. The tunnel was narrow, just wide enough to move through on hands and knees. The walls were packed earth and ancient stone, and they smelled of old wood and heat, like the inside of an attic no one had entered in decades. The darkness deepened behind her. The farther she went, the warmer the air grew. Not like furnace heat, but living warmth, like a body pressed close to hers. She could hear her own breath, and beneath it, a hum, a low sound, toneless yet aware. Then she reached it. The tunnel opened into a small hollow chamber, no taller than a child. Emily sat back on her heels, lantern raised. The walls were covered in names, etched by hand, dozens of them, some in careful script, others rushed, almost frantic. Some were half-finished. E. Wright, Clara M. Jonas. T. 1938. M.H. J.H. 1997. She ran her fingers along the letters, almost reverently. Then her eyes fell on a single wooden shelf, sagging with age. Laid upon it were objects, a small red mitten, a girl's broken glasses, a boy's marble, a doll's head, each one labeled with initials scratched into the shelf beneath it. Memory tokens, a room of what was left. And in the corner, tucked behind a faded music box, was something that didn't belong. A photograph, slightly curled at the edges. A girl standing in the field behind the Kessler house, no more than 11. Her, Emily Kessler. Someone had placed her photo here long ago. A sharp sound behind her made her freeze. The hum grew louder, not from the walls, from inside her. A voice, not spoken but thought, slipped into her mind like fog under a door. "Will you trade?" She shook her head, backing against the wall. "Trade what?" she whispered. But she already knew. This place kept what it remembered. One memory for another. One name for one lost. "He's still here," the voice whispered. "You may bring him back, but something must take his place." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Jacob. Alive? Somehow? No, not alive, but held. preserved in the house's memory like a pressed flower. "Will you trade?" the voice asked again, and then, just for a moment, she heard Jacob's voice in her mind. "Please, I don't want to be forgotten." Emily clutched the photograph of herself. It wants a memory in return. Her story, herself. Would she vanish so he could return? Was that the price? She crawled backward, heart pounding, breath shaking. The tunnel seemed longer now, the hum louder, the warmth suffocating. But she emerged into the furnace room again, sweat on her brow, hands trembling. The wall was unchanged, the chamber behind it, sealed now somehow, as if it had shown her only what it wanted her to see. And now, it waited. Emily stood at the kitchen sink, staring through the frosted window at the empty road beyond. The house was quiet again, but not peacefully so. It was the silence of something that had made a request and was now waiting for an answer. Her fingers still trembled from the crawl through the tunnel. She had washed them twice, but she could still feel the dust beneath her nails, still smell the stale warmth in her hair. "Will you trade?" She couldn't stop hearing the question. It had been more than a whisper. It had felt like a presence pressing into her thoughts, folding around her name. Behind her, her mother entered the kitchen, wrapped in her winter shawl. "I need you to tell me the truth," Emily said without turning. "All of it." Her mother paused, then pulled out a chair and sat. "The night Jacob disappeared," Emily said softly. "It wasn't just a night he wandered off, was it?" Her mother was quiet for a long time. The refrigerator clicked off. A distant wind pressed against the siding of the house, rattling it gently. Finally, her mother spoke. "No," she began slowly, as if the words had been kept in a room that hadn't been opened in decades. "Your father," she said. "He found the tunnel first, before Jacob ever mentioned it." Emily turned. "He never said anything. He didn't want to. Said it was probably an old root cellar. But something bothered him, something about the heat coming from that wall. And sometimes, the noise." Her mother rubbed her hands together. "Then Jacob started hearing things, saying the wall talked to him, that it told him stories, that it remembered things people forgot." Emily felt cold again, deep in her chest. "He said there were names inside," her mother continued, "that it wanted to show him something. We thought it was imagination. Your father humored him, even let him sleep down there once." Emily's head snapped up. "What?" "Just once. Jacob begged him. Said the wall would stop whispering if it knew he listened. Your father thought it was just a phase." A long pause. "That night, Jacob never came back up." Her mother looked at her now, eyes shining. "We searched. We called the police. You remember, but no one could find the tunnel. It was sealed again. But you knew. I knew something had taken him, or kept him. And then one day, a man showed up. Michael Hallbrook. He said he'd been to the house years before, said he'd heard about Jacob and wanted to help. He said the house kept memories, and that it asked for them in return." Her voice broke. "He said we could have Jacob back, but someone else would have to take his place." Emily stared. "You didn't—" "No," her mother said firmly. "We didn't agree. We begged it to release him. But the house went silent. The wall sealed again. Michael, he disappeared. And you never told me." Her mother's voice cracked. "You were just a girl. We wanted to protect what little of our family we had left." Emily rose slowly from her chair. "It's asking again," she said. "Last night, it offered again." Her mother's face turned pale. "You can't," she whispered. "It doesn't give, it replaces." Emily walked to the doorway and looked toward the basement stairs. "I think it remembers me now," she said quietly. "And I think it's asking me to choose this time." That night she sat alone in her childhood bedroom with the journal in her lap and Jacob's figurine beside her on the nightstand. It no longer faced the window. Now it pointed directly at the door. The furnace hummed faintly through the floor. The house was listening. Emily couldn't sleep. The hum of the furnace vibrated through her mattress, a low pulse that matched her heartbeat. The figurine on her nightstand hadn't moved again, but she no longer believed it needed to. The house knew her now. It had waited. It had watched. And now it had asked. She rose before dawn and lit a candle. The power still hadn't come back, though no other houses in town had reported outages. Just hers. She pulled out an old notebook and sat at the desk by the window, the flame flickering beside her. And she began to write. Dear Jacob, I don't know if you'll ever read this, or if the house will let it find you, but I need to try. You've been gone a long time. Long enough that people stopped asking, long enough that some forgot you were ever here. But I didn't. I never stopped listening for your footsteps on the stairs. I used to blame myself for not staying with you, for not telling Mom and Dad that something about the basement wasn't right. But I was just a kid, and so were you. You were curious, brave, always trying to understand things no one else could. Maybe that's why it noticed you. Maybe that's why it chose you. But here's the truth. You are not forgotten. I remember the way you laughed when your glasses slipped down your nose. I remember how you collected those weird coins from cereal boxes. I remember you used to say the furnace sounded like a sleeping dragon. I remember you, Jacob. And if memory is what the house wants, if it feeds on remembering, then it already has everything it needs. So I won't trade myself. I won't give you up. And I won't let the house take another name just to fill its hollow rooms. But I will give it this. I give it every memory I have of you. Every one. She folded the letter and pressed her thumb to the seal. Then, carrying only her lantern and the paper, she descended into the basement. The furnace room felt warmer than ever. The tunnel behind the bricks still gaped open like a mouth waiting for its next breath. Emily knelt beside it. She whispered, "This is yours now," and slid the letter into the opening. The air changed. The hum stopped. For the first time in weeks, the silence wasn't heavy. It was listening. Then, a sound. From deep within the tunnel, a soft shuffle, a sigh, and then a voice, faint, dry, but real. "Emily," she gasped. The voice was older, tired, but it was his. "Emily, I remember." She leaned forward, hands trembling. "Jacob?" The silence returned. But this time it was not emptiness, it was peace. She turned back toward the room. On the furnace floor now sat something that hadn't been there before, a coin, plastic, red, from a cereal box. Jacob's. Emily didn't speak of the voice to her mother. Not yet. She kept the coin in her pocket, a piece of childhood plastic now heavier than anything she'd ever held. She turned it over again and again that morning, unable to stop herself from wondering, had Jacob sent it, or had the house returned it? Walt came back by midday, carrying a bundle of rope, a portable heater, and a wary expression. "You're pale," he said, setting things down by the door. "You sleep at all?" Emily shook her head. "It spoke to me last night." Walt paused. "It? I don't know what else to call it. But I heard my brother's voice. He said he remembered." Walt frowned. "That tunnel's more than a tunnel. You know that now, right? It's not just old stone. It's a memory," she finished. "It's a memory that doesn't forget." They descended into the basement, the air again oddly still. The furnace was silent now, cold. The heat had moved elsewhere. The tunnel was different, wider, no longer cramped and clawing. It had opened. Walt stared into it. "It's like it wanted us to come back." They entered together. The dirt walls gave way to smooth stone. The air was warm, but dry. The strange hum had softened, not gone, but calmer, like a heartbeat returning to rest. The chamber beyond hadn't changed, not in shape, but it had grown. New shelves lined the walls, new names, And beneath one shelf, Emily froze. Her name, E. Kessler. Beneath it, not a toy, not a ribbon, a page, torn from her letter. Only a single sentence remained. You are not forgotten. Walt stepped beside her and looked down at the floor. Emily. He pointed. She turned. In the center of the room, someone had placed something gently in the dust. A pair of worn, child-sized sneakers. Familiar. One of the laces was tied in a knot the way Jacob always did. His dragon loop, he called it. Emily dropped to her knees, a hand trembling as she reached out to touch them. Still warm, as if only recently worn. Then she noticed it, a faint outline in the dust behind them. Footprints, small, bare, leading deeper. I think he's still moving, she whispered. Walt glanced around. You think he's alive? Emily shook her head. Not like we think, but something of him is still here, and he's trying to show us something. They followed the prints carefully down a smaller tunnel, just wide enough to crouch through. The path twisted once, twice, then opened into a stone hollow with only one object inside, a wooden door. Old, warped. No frame, no handle, just a door standing upright in the dirt. Carved across the grain, barely legible. Below the name, Memory Waits. Walt whispered, You think this is it? Emily nodded, but she didn't move to touch it yet. Something beyond the door stirred, not threatening, but guarded, as if the house wanted to make sure she was ready before it showed her what had never been meant to be seen. The door had no knob, just wood, smooth, pale, slightly glowing with age, as if time had worn it gently, not harshly, as if even the years had known to tread softly here. Emily stood before it, her fingers hovering inches from its grain. Walt waited behind her, silent. He didn't ask if she was sure. They both knew this moment had been waiting since 1997. She pressed her palm to the wood. Warm. It opened not with a creak, but a hush, like pages turning in a forgotten book. And beyond it, light. Not bright, but soft. Gold-dusted, like early morning sun filtered through memory. The kind of light that knew how to be gentle with grief. Emily stepped through. It was a room, familiar yet impossible. A recreation of Jacob's childhood bedroom, down to the crooked poster of a spaceship on the wall, the cracked globe beside the bed, the drawer that never fully closed. The colors weren't exact, but her memory filled in the blanks. And there, sitting cross-legged on the floor, was a boy. Small, barefoot, hair tousled the same way it always had after sleep. He turned and smiled. Hi, Em. Her knees gave and she dropped to the floor. Jacob? He looked older and younger all at once, his face still round with childhood, but his eyes, they held years. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. He tilted his head. You wrote me a letter. I did. It helped. The wall doesn't whisper as much now. It listens. She moved closer. How are you here? Why are you still... He looked down at the floor. I stayed. When the door opened that night, I thought I was supposed to. I thought it wanted stories. You were a child. So were you. He looked up again. The house didn't want to hurt us, Em. It just wanted to remember. It was built from memory. It keeps what people forget. Tears blurred her vision. I didn't forget you. I know. That's why it let you in. She looked around. Is this where you've been? All these years? Part of me, he said. Part of me's still where I left it. He reached behind him and lifted something from the floor. Her old necklace. The one she'd buried in the yard when he disappeared. A little charm shaped like a book. I kept this, he said softly. It reminded me of you. She took it slowly, holding it like it might vanish. Jacob, can you come back? He paused. The walls around them flickered, not visibly, but in feeling, a memory shifting under pressure. He shook his head. Not the way you hope. But, he said, you can let me go. Emily